This Oregon State matchup is going to be a big one. It's time for some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies to Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Lars Hanson, as always, great to have you here. Let's jump right into it here. Washington is heading down for I feel like it's safe to call this the biggest matchup ever with Oregon State at Racer Stadium in Corvallis. Let's dive right into the offense here. What is your first key to the game on the offensive side?
I'm going to keep beating this drum until proven otherwise. And it has to be, no matter what, the obvious one is like Michael Penix and the offense has to cook, right? But where has it started the past few games? With a semblance of the run game, controlling the line of scrimmage, especially against a good defense, just like Utah, Oregon State, able to kind of pack the box at times, really control the run. And I think that's where if Washington, again, I'm not saying you have to run, one pass, one pass. You just have to be able to have some sense of, hey, we're not just relying on Penix here, because Oregon State's defense is too good to where if you're just expecting to pass against them, it's not necessarily going to be the same result. Oregon State's defense isn't great, right? They're not top three in the conference, but they're right in the middle of the pack and closer to top five than they are to bottom six, right? And so it's a matter of, can you control the line of scrimmage early? Can you maybe get an early lead to where your defense can kind of start to sit back and pin their ears back versus having to just keep pace? Because especially on the road, those are when those games get dicey. We saw it against Arizona. We've seen it a couple of times this season where, hey, it's looking a little close. It could, one possession here, one possession there. It's a different result. So controlling the line of scrimmage is where it starts for me.
So I've got a really interesting stat for you, because this Oregon State defense is good. But if you were to go out on a limb and say how many times do you think they've given up 400 yards this season?
Once?
It's 3 times.
Okay.
So the first time was in a 38-35 loss to Washington State. The second time was in a 52-40 win over the Cal Golden Bears. Yep, the Cal Golden Bears. And then the third time was in a 36-24 win over the UCLA Bruins. They gave it 528 to Wazoo, 447 to Cal, and 453 to UCLA. And for those last two teams, they're like middle of the road when it comes to offense, just like offensive production in the Pac-12. But there are some real problems with both of those teams. And I'm sure people are going to bring up the 500 yards against Washington for Cal, even though, we've discussed how that stat is not entirely accurate. And I think that's really interesting, because one thing that, you see when you look at Oregon State on film is they are a really solid team. They've had some really, really good games, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But I think that one thing that Washington can kind of do to move Oregon State around is run the ball effectively early. And I have a piece on Inside the Huskies about how Dillon Johnson has rushed for over 100 yards only 3 times this year, but it's in all 3 of Washington's ranked wins. So and then, the Arizona one, he was also where he was closest to doing it again, where he had 91 yards, but they weren't ranked at the time. So that doesn't count. It's a narrative here that we're playing for. And, I think that Oregon State's defensive line is really light. And I think Washington's big hulking offensive line, especially when you look at the guards and just some of the things that Washington's done offensively, they can really move the Beavers off their spot up front. And if you're able to establish the run in where weather could play a factor in this game, I think that would be huge for Washington to do that early and just get Dillon Johnson going.
Yeah, one of the 2 keys about Washington State and Cal, both of those were on the road for Oregon State. This one's at Reser, so it's even more of an onus to say, hey, you're now the underdog. You're not only the underdog, you're the underdog road team. So you're already having
first time this season too.
Right, and you have a significant uphill battle, so it's a matter of, hey, take the wind out of their sails. Yes, I know Washington likes to do the shot plays and things like that, but you set up the shot plays not by nickeling and diming, but, taking the 18, taking the 15. And Dillon Johnson has shown, hey, I can get 10, 12 yards on a carry, right? Now, he's averaging, I think, 4 or 5, somewhere in that range. But the point being, you can use the run game as just much of a game-breaking ability as you can a deep shot. And the problem is when you take those deep shots and don't connect, you're higher is more of a likelihood of going 3 and out, right? Or at least going into 3rd and long and then hoping for the best, right? If you're able to get 5 yards on first down with a run, and then that opens up so much more to either go crossing route, middle. There's so much more versus if you're, hey, Penix drops back, misses. Now all of a sudden you're in 3rd and 10.
Right.
And if you decide to run the ball, now you're hoping for 10 yards on 3rd down because there's nowhere you're going for it on 4th down at the start of the game. But I mean, to that point, we've seen other Dan Lanning in Oregon. When you get behind the sticks, then you have to chase the game, and you have to go forward on 4th down. So you don't want to put yourself in that position. And how do you do that? You establish, hey, we can run the ball. We're not just a passing offense here. We can run the ball and control the clock and still have Michael Penix throw for over 300 yards. So it doesn't take the ball out of his hand, right? He doesn't need to throw 40, 50 times a game. He can throw 35 to 40. And Dillon can get his 20, and that's all you need. That's right. Really kind of the balance of it doesn't need to be half and half. It needs to be like 70-30, 60-40.
And it's also one of the things that I know we talked about, especially after the USC game, is that it opens up so much in terms of play action. And that's something where especially if these receivers see a lot of man coverage, it's something we know that they can just absolutely obliterate at times this year, especially if Jalen McMillan is going to play in this game. We'll see kind of how much he plays, all that sort of stuff. But even the fact that we know that he's going to play, that's a lot. We're fairly confident that Giles Jackson will probably suit up after dealing with an injury that kept him out for the Utah game. So that's just an extra piece that helps this Husky offense moving forward. And with some of the speed and just some of the things that we've seen these receivers do in one-on-one coverage this season, Washington's offense will find a way to take advantage of this. And we're fairly confident of that. It's just a matter of how well are they going to execute. And if, this team has shown us anything this season, it's that they execute at a high level incredibly consistently.
Right, and I think there's only one outlier there, that's Arizona State. But because you're on the road, you've had that clunker out of the way. I mean, I'm trying to think of. I mean, Arizona's probably their worst road game of the season, and that's gotten significantly better each as they've gone along. So it's not that if that's your worst result, you're still scoring plus 30 points. Oregon State allows 20 points per game. So as long as you can clear kind of 30 points, if Washington clears 30, they win this game. And actually we go back and look at the last 2 years, as I said on yesterday's show, Washington under Ryan Grubb was no different than Washington under John Donovan.
Yep, that was your interesting stat of the day. I like that one.
There's your motivation, and I mean, if the offensive line needs any motivation, I know Oregon State offensive line, one of their offensive linemen got nominated for the Outland Trophy.
Alicia Puaga, yeah.
Not Troy Rosen, Troy Fatana, Roger Rosen. Man, wouldn't that be a beast of a
that? I was gonna say
like that one would definitely make the Outland finalist. But I mean, there's so much bulletin board material. Like, hey, you guys people still think you're 5. People don't think you're better than Florida State. There's so much bulletin board material for this team this week. Like, hey, why not go beat Oregon State by 2 touchdowns? Prove that you're the number 4 team in the country. It's not that we don't think they are, right? But you have to have those kind of results in order for it to count. Yes, the win matters more than anything else, right? If you win by 3 or you win by 20, it doesn't matter. But it does matter in the sense of, hey, if you get a significant 2-touchdown victory on the road and you got a 10-point victory at USC, now Oregon State is certainly better defensively than USC. But I don't think Oregon State offensively is as scary as USC. So it's not going to be a shootout.
Sure.
And to me, you take Washington's offense over Oregon State's offense, Oregon State's defense slightly over Washington's defense. The offense should still carry the day at this point. And the defense has enough pieces to where we'll talk more about it in the next segment, but there's enough pieces there to where it's not USC. You should be able to manage this one as long as you can,
Right. Speaking of that next segment, here on Locked On Huskies, we're going to get into the defensive keys of the game. But first, we're going to give a shout out to our good friends over at Prize Picks. And as everybody knows, I love fantasy football and everything to do with that. And that's one of the many, many reasons that I love Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is the most fun you can have, winning up to 25 times their money this football season. And now you can play during basketball season too. All you have to do is select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entries. One of the coolest things about Prize Picks is their reboot policy, so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for football and basketball games. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return on the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Testing skills on Prize Picks is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Do you want to get in on the action? Go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Ready to move on to the defense here?
I think so.
All right. Where do you want to start here?
I mean,
the easy one.
if Bucky Irving is greased up deaf guy, Damian Martinez is his cousin. Like it's you go back and look at the game last season. I mean, that's the thing that people I think honestly forget about last season. And I know we've talked about it, but that was one of, and I'm looking at it, one of their more closer games when all was said and done, right? It was 24-21 Washington against the top 10 Washington team. Oregon State was 6-2, I believe, coming in. So relatively about the same as they are now. And it's been one of those where you have to go back a ways to find the last time Washington blew out Oregon State. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but that's sure. In order to blow a team out and to have a 2-touchdown victory, that means your defense has got to make some stops. And this is an offense where it's good enough to move the ball, but not elite enough to where it's USC or Oregon. And you're like, whoa, how do we contain Bo Nix and Troy Franklin and Bucky? And the list goes on. USC with Caleb Williams, right? DJ Uiagalelei, good, certainly better than what Dabo Swinney was able to do with him in Clemson. But I don't necessarily – I think this is his ceiling, right, in the sense of, like, this is a perfect game for Washington to say, hey, you know what? We can control the run. We can control DJ because he's not the game breaker that Caleb is. He's not the game breaker that Bo Nix is. He's not the passer that I'm going to give Bo Nix credit for being, and certainly Caleb Williams. But he's right kind of in that 5 range, right? Kind of where Oregon State is in the conference stats. This is not a get-right game. This is a prove-it game for Washington. Take the right angles, control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Damian Martinez is going to get his yards, but you just got to force field goals, not touchdowns. I think that's kind of where you're at. You can bend, but not, and that's basically what Washington's defense has been this season, right? You're bending, but you're not totally breaking and letting the dam open.
No, I agree. And I think that the one thing that we really need to focus on here is if they're able to just kind of just control the run early on, not because they're not going to totally stop it. That's just not something we've seen this season. But if they're able to control it just enough, especially forcing Oregon State into some third and medium, third and long kind of not super manageable situations, while it's going to be really tough to get after the passer in this game. The one thing that DJ has shown throughout his entire career is that he can be somewhat inconsistent when it comes to throwing the ball, where he has a spectacular arm. He's got all world talent, but every once in a while it can just be a little bit erratic, where there will be a bad interception that's thrown, a couple of missed passes. And especially like we talked about a little bit in the first segment, the weather could play a factor in this, where there might be some wind, there might be some rain. We'll kind of see how it plays out because these things always change. But that's one thing where if you're able to just kind of, if he's not because there are days where he's incredible and he can't miss, and that happens. But if that's not Saturday, you're going to have a shot to take the ball away. And if you can find a way to get a turnover or two, especially against a wide receiver core that is really quick and really talented with the ball in their hands, if you can just find a way to make a play on the ball early and not let them create after the catch and find a way to force missed tackles and all that sort of stuff. I think that that's going to be just really crucial. Whereas, because if DJ can really like find a way to get into rhythm, that's going to be a huge problem. But if there's not enough because to even throw him off his spot, like I think that the pass rush is going to do a decent job, but this Oregon State offensive line is just tremendous. And before we continue here, Lars, did you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube? Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. But gotta move right along here. Do you think that there's any way or what do you think would be the best way to find a way to put pressure on DJ?
Well, I mean, Washington has that ability, right? With Bralen Trice and ZTF. I think so. So it's a matter of, can you find that third rusher? Can you find either Eddie, or you have a nickel blitzer, or Voight if he comes off the bench? I mean, I'm curious to see how much pop Jacob Lane gets in this game, because after seeing what he did against Utah, he can certainly rush the passer. I mean, and doing it from the more of an interior than a true edge position. I haven't seen Bralen Trice or ZTF lined up the middle of the season, right? And I'm not saying they're going to, but it's almost
they've done it a little bit at times.
Right. I'm not saying they haven't. I don't know if I said that they haven't, but more, they haven't certainly done it as much as I would think, right? Especially with the limited and the low number of sacks that they've gotten, just because, again, Price has been held and double teamed every play, and ZTF has almost been too good at reading the snap count and kind of been a little bit out of assignment. But you need to have that third rusher that says, hey, if these two guys get, blocked up, or if they collapse the pocket but don't get there, that's where Washington has been susceptible to giving up those big plays from a quarterback on the ground, where you push the pocket, the quarterback climbs up in the pocket, and now there's nobody behind him because everybody else is either going downfield or the linebackers are going out wide. That's when those game-breaking plays happen, and that's how drives stay extended and things like that. So it's about being assignment sound and having that kind of spy on DJ, or not a true spy, but kind of just somebody up the middle. Because again, I want to go back to that play against Stanford, the 12 men on the field where nobody was up the middle and you score a rushing touchdown. Like that level of lack of assignment sound football can't happen against Oregon State, because Stanford almost made you pay. Oregon State will make you pay. So it's a matter of, can you limit DJ's ability and force him into being a true passer? Because he hasn't had a 300-yard passing game this season. I'm going to double check that stat, but I believe that is correct. Yeah, 284 was his highest, and that was against San Diego State. Okay, but to his credit, and this is what he did not do at Clemson, maybe that's because Dabo couldn't get it out of him or whatever the case may be, he hasn't turned the ball over. He's got a 20-4 touchdown to interception ratio. So, and Washington has been better at forcing picks this season, but they're not great. They're certainly not where the defense has been in previous years. So if it's a game management situation, okay, I would trust Washington's defensive backs to be in position. And that's, again, like I told you yesterday, if I told you 38 yards inside this game, that's one drive. That's a couple of plays here and there. So making sure that DJ doesn't extend those plays and get out, because he can run. When that thought scares me if Washington is an assignment sound with the middle, because DJ is going to run for days if that's the case.
No, I agree with you there. And I think that just kind of as we wrap this one up, I think that it will all start with just wrapping up and tackling. Right. And that's one of the biggest things that we've seen all season long, where where that concerns me more is the receivers. Like Damian Martinez is just going to run through people sometimes, and every once in a while there's nothing you can do about that. But I think that especially when you look at their wide receivers, they're really, really good in space. Slade Bolden, especially, that dude can play. I like watching him a lot. And when you just look at what Washington has just kind of been, it hasn't been necessarily great at this season, is just getting those stops early on. It's getting two hands on a ball carrier, and then they're still able to get extra yards. That's what cannot happen. And I'm certain that Oregon State is going to want to run some of those quick screens and some of those things that has given Washington trouble this season. We saw Utah do it. We saw Boise State take advantage of that early on in the season. And just some of those quick hitting plays where it's get the ball into space, and especially with the way that Washington likes to play off with some of their cornerbacks, that's going to cause problems. And just making sure that you can wrap up and tackle on some of those plays is going to be absolutely crucial. And before we move on here, we got one more shout out we got to give, and that is to our friends over at Athletic Brewing, because it is now time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. And much like Odunze, who became just the second receiver in Washington history to go over 1,000 yards in back-to-back seasons, Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. They brew over 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, golden sours, and more. They're consistently releasing limited edition experimental styles to add to their variety, and they're fit for all times, so you can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity even more enjoyable, like watching a big game or your kid's game, tackling work or working out, etc. And one of the best parts about it is there are no hangovers ever. You can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON. Check out 50% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Are you ready for our favorite segment of the week? I know I am.
Oh yeah. While you were doing that read, I was looking at the FanDuel same game parlay, so we're cooking, baby.
I like it. And as is tradition, who went first last week?
I think I did.
Oh, sweet. All right, then I will just kick us off, and I will go back to one of my old faithful wells here, and it's something we talked about in the first segment here. I'm going to go with Dillon Johnson, taking that over. I'm not going to go total yards, though. I'm going to go straight rushing yards this time. I'm going to go over 125 rushing yards alone and a touchdown in this game.
I think FanDuel agrees with you, because Dillon Johnson is minus money until you get to 100-plus yards, and he's plus 118. So, yeah. Yeah, and also if they win the game, that's Dillon's going to have over 100. And certainly UW as a team rushing is going to have over 100, because if you're under 100, that's a wrap. I mean, that's just a flat-out wrap. So I like that. Any touchdown? Do you want to throw a touchdown one in there?
I said one touchdown with there, yeah.
Oh, and one touchdown. Okay, I was focusing on the yards there. So I'm going to stay on the offense. My guy, who hasn't had a 100-yard game since Stanford, and that was run of 3 straight. He's had 2 straight 50-plus games. Give me Jalen Polk.
Okay.
90-plus yards. And the reason why I say 90-plus is because FanDuel has his odds at 80 yards plus 118 is only the plus money you can get. Everything less than that is minus money. So I actually know what I'm gonna raise the stakes here. I'm gonna go 110 and 2 touchdowns for Jalen Polk.
I like that. Okay, so I feel like that's going to depend a lot on Jalen McMillan and what his role is in this game. Because if we see, as we talked about a little bit earlier, if we see Jalen get a big increase in snaps, and let's say he gets 20, I think that we're going to see 4 or 5 targets somewhere in there, maybe a couple of catches, and that will probably either really hurt or really help Jalen Polk in this. Because we'll see where they're aligned and kind of what some of the reads and progressions are in some of those plays. But I can definitely see that one because like we talked about earlier, UW just loves attacking man coverage, and especially with the way that Dillon Johnson has run the ball these last couple of weeks, I think that if they're going to try to sell out to stop the run, then Jalen Polk and Odunze and all those guys are just going to absolutely eat. And I think it's now time for a tradition of an anytime touchdown scorer in this game. And I'm going to parlay this one together with one that we talked about before the show. Give me the Damian Martinez 2+ touchdowns that you talked about. And I want to parlay that together with a Jalen McMillan anytime touchdown. I want to throw those two together. I think that that's got a really good chance of hitting. Damian Martinez, obviously, such a huge point of that Oregon State offense. And then Jalen McMillan, if he's able to get through this whole game, he gets more snaps. I think that they're going to try to just get him back in rhythm and just remind him, hey, remember when he scored 4 touchdowns in that first game of the year? Or this is what that feels like. It's been a while, so let's get you back to that.
I feel that. So I'll do one more offense, and I'm gonna go to the defense for my next one after this, and I'm gonna take an anytime touchdown. We talked about it before the show. This seems like a game where a tight end is going to score, right? It kind of has that feel of like, hey, if you get in, almost like go back to the Michigan State game, which is the last time and the only time Washington held an opposing offense to under 100 yards rushing, was Westover had a big 3 touchdown game. I think this is more or less that kind of game where it's. And I talked with our friend of the show, Mike Farrell, on Wednesday, I believe, about this, where Washington doesn't play gritty, but they have somewhat of a gritty mindset, right? Where it's not, and I think that's more or less, some people will say, oh, this is going to be a gritty game because I'm like, it's more of a gritty mindset than the actual play. Like, this is not going to be, a 35 carry for both teams, just grounded out and maybe 200 yards passing. It's like, you're still going to get Penix plus 300 and all that stuff. But it really is going to be that sort of gritty game. And that tells me Jack Westover anytime touchdown.
Okay.
I was going to say Devin Culp.
I was going to say you were on the Culp one before the show.
But, Westover almost had the one against USC, and it went to Culp. So this is kind of a flipping the script of that, where, hey, another top 10 matchup on the road. This time Westy gets it instead of Culp. Although I would love to see Devin Culp also get a touchdown. Man, if we could probably have 2 touchdowns, one to each tight end.
I think you can probably absolutely do that.
You know what? Let's make it official. 1 touchdown each for Jack Westover and Devin Culp.
I wish I had like a stamp sound effect. Just there we go. All right, I'm gonna give you one more on the offense because we always have to talk about him, and we saved it to the end. And I appreciate you letting me have this one. Go Michael Penix here. Go a little bit lower than we normally do, just to make it somewhat to make it bold because we see him hit this number every week. So I'm gonna say he's going to only, in terms of Michael Penix, only go for 310 yards and 3 touchdowns, which feels lower end. And I feel like we're going to get some comments like, oh, that's not bold. And like Oregon State's defense is good, whatever. But I just, with the way that Michael Penix like just usually operates, I feel like it's bold to just not say as we like to 350 and 4 touchdowns, something like that. So I'm going to hold true with that. And you got anything on that, or do you want to move over to the defensive side?
No, like FanDuel is minus 174 for 300 plus yards, but plus 102 for 325. So you're in the ballpark. Okay, it's good.
I'll take it.
And to be fair, he has had a couple, and that's what slight segue here. That's just crazy to think about. Michael Penix hasn't thrown for 300 every single game, and yet he still is clear and above the nation's passing leader, and almost has 2 1,000-yard receivers. That includes the Arizona State game. That includes the Stanford game. That includes. What other game am I missing?
The Arizona game threw for like 360. Just didn't.
Right. But I feel like there's one other game where Penix necessarily didn't hit that 300-400 yard mark where he
USC.
That was, I knew there was one. Thank you. I was like, I knew, but the point is, to that point, they're still winning these games. So that's where it counts. I'm gonna go give me defense. I got to steal one from you here. Give me Jabbar Muhammad interception. Just keep it simple.
Okay.
Jabbar Muhammad, then that'll be one of the ways that changes the game, because you need to steal a drive in order to win this game and win this game convincingly. You need to steal a drive.
Quick plug here. I'm writing a Jabbar Muhammad story right now for Inside the Huskies, so make sure you check that out when it gets published. So I appreciate that. I like that one a lot. I'm going to stick in the turnover vein here because this one I'm cooking up, and I want to see what you think of it. Washington will force 2 fumbles in this game. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to recover both, but they haven't really done that a lot this season. I say they force 2 fumbles in this game.
When was the last time, besides Zion's, which the entire world knows about, and as they should, by the way, I'm not belaboring that, but Washington has recovered. How many fumbles do you think they've recovered this season?
1.
Yeah. Yep. And for clarification, the only other team that has the same amount is Stanford. However, Washington has forced 7 fumbles, but they've only recovered 1. So to your point, Stanford's forced 2. So that is what it says. So do we want one more? Let's go score. We're running out of time. We gotta get a score here, right?
All right. Well, drum roll. Here we go. Lars is always accurate score prediction. What do you got for us?
Well, I was right last week when I got 35 for Washington. So I hit that, and Oregon State screwed me with 4 points. So I'm gonna go. They got to get over 30. 38-30, Washington.
Okay. All right. I like that a lot. I don't know if I have anything else on that. That's a fun one. I can definitely see that. And if this is a 38-30 ball game and Washington still doesn't find a way to move into the top 4, I don't even know what to say at this point with the committee and with all these other things. But on that note, Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers out there with us. We have so much fun, especially with these Friday shows where we just get to talk about predictions and all that sort of stuff. So we really appreciate you hanging with us every day. And if you're new to the channel, hey, welcome. We love having you here. Please remember to subscribe so you don't miss anything. We will be coming at you live after the game. Neither Lars nor I are able to make it down to Corvallis, so we will be able to go live after the game for you right here on this channel. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. How do you subscribe? Super easy. Wherever you get your podcast, we are there. YouTube, Spotify, Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. Like the show. Leave us a 5-star review for audio only. Leave us a comment down there. We try to get back to as many of you as we possibly can. And again, subscribe. Follow us on Twitter. Shoot us as many notes as you want because we do appreciate the interaction. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you after the game.